Hello and welcome to the first unboxing bout of 2021. Today, my sparring partner is Ben Jeffries. Ben is the co-founder and CEO of Influencer, which connects some of the biggest global brands around the world with content creators on social media across the world. Really looking forward to just hearing about Ben's backstory and how he's created such a big agency really at such a young age, and how he sort of clocked onto that trend of influencers and content creators and created a business around it. And then also I'm quite keen to transition on just generally to social media. There's been a lot of talk around social media recently with the social dilemma and how it's impacting mental health. So I'm keen to get his thoughts just from a more zoomed out perspective. But without any further ado, welcome to the ring, Ben.
No, thank you so much for having me, Harry. Yeah, really looking forward to this. I think, when I looked back on a few of the other people that have been onto the podcast, it was great to see, other people in the industry as well. I saw the 1 year with Chris at Verb as well. So that was cool. I spoke to Chris about a year ago at some yacht forum.
Okay.
I think it was like we were both the marketing experts there. I think Chris was much more there because he's more around luxury brands. But I was getting my sort of influencer edge to it. But no, thank you so much for having me on, and really excited to talk more.
No, thanks a lot for coming on. Yeah, it's cool. I've kind of had, Chris, and then there was Rob, Pierre, who you've probably come across from Jellyfish as well. So yeah, I've had a few. I didn't really set out to, have like CEOs of really, marketing agencies that are doing really well, but I've had, three pretty guys that are doing some really cool stuff already. So that's awesome. But I'm really keen to just start off by, like, I've heard a few snippets and you've probably talked about this, thousands of times, but I'd love to just hear, like, really narrowing in down on like how like this all came about for you. And like, it's clear that to start a company like this, you must have sort of seen things that other people didn't really see. So just tell me a little bit about, how I think it started sort of right back at school for you. So talk to me about how it all kicked off and how you came eventually to running Influencer.
Yeah, of course. So, wow, I mean, it feels so long ago. I mean, I suppose when I was about 16, 17, me and my friends used to have basically this saying, which was chatting breeze. And we were basically like joking around saying, how funny would it be if there was this word breeze, which would be on like a t-shirt or a cap, and so forth. So I kind of took that as like, there's a bit of demand for this. So I suppose just my own, I guess, entrepreneurial instinct then led me to saying, okay, well, let's try and create this clothing brand. So I created the clothing brand. I made that sound like it was so much easier than it actually was, but that in its essence took me ages.
Yeah.
But anyway, I made this clothing brand, started selling it to like friends and family, and people were actually really liking it. And it didn't necessarily stem back to that phrase "chatting breeze" because obviously that means rubbish. So in theory, that would be people were wearing clothing brand saying like shit or rubbish, so to speak. But people were like asking for more like stock and more items, and it was starting to build a bit of popularity. So I was like, okay, well, maybe I can try and take this to the next level. And everyone knows if celebrities wear your clothes, that can really, I guess, accelerate a brand's journey. Now, the issue was I was at school. I didn't know any celebrities. I didn't have any money to pay for celebrities who, have these like big time agents from, the big time agencies like WME or IMG. So I decided to take quite a different approach. So I'm quite a big Chelsea Football Club fan. We'll keep that quiet for the moment based on recent results. But, quite a big Chelsea Football Club fan. And I decided to start reaching out to the reserve team players at Chelsea and the youth team players. So these people had like 10, 15, 20,000 followers at the time on Twitter. And because they're on like youth and like training contracts, they're not actually getting paid that much at this stage. So I basically just sent them a tweet saying, can I send you some clothes? And I'll pay like 50 quid just to post like a tweet wearing my clothes. And they were really happy to do so. So I started basically getting these like smaller, which I suppose now are called like micro influencers, wearing the clothes. And I started branching out to not just, but other sort of people who had this like smaller following, so to speak, on these social networks. And then I thought, wow, I'm getting such a good response from this. Other brands can benefit it from it too. And I was kind of a bit like, a clothing brand's cool, but realistically, that's a whole journey which I don't know if I can mentally prepare myself for.
Yeah.
How about taking something which is relatively fresh to the market, which is this whole element of influencers, something which is like really exciting because, back in the early days, everyone's really super excited about social media, and offering that to other brands. So I kind of, put Breeze to one side and pivoted and moved towards, setting up influencer, growing influencer out. And I was actually on my gap year by the time I decided to, I guess, move in this direction. And I was working in advertising sales for a local, a local company. And then it basically, I guess, piqued my interest. But, years on, then what I decided to do is I came across people like who my co-founder is today. So Caspar Lee, he's like a world-renowned YouTuber. And Caspar understood the creator side of the business really well. I felt I understood the advertiser side from my own, experience. And I suppose that merge of our information helped to create that meaningful relationship between the brands and the creators, which really helps to grow influencer as a business. And, it's been a crazy journey, but, we've done everything from, raising multiple rounds of investment up to Series A at the moment. We've done things like, won global accounts for brands like Pernod Ricard, Alibaba, Ocado in the UK as well. And we've worked with some of the world's largest creators, from, back to the football roots of Ronaldinho to, larger creators like, your Joe Suggs of the world, your Amanda Chernies. So, it's awesome. Been a phenomenal journey.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. What I wanted to ask is, it's often like in hindsight, it looks so obvious, the path, and this was always going to be the case. But I know we spoke a little bit off air, like what was actually going on in the background? Like obviously you were at school, and then, you had different paths you potentially maybe could have taken. So was it always as obvious as you knew this was exactly what you wanted to do? Or were there a few struggles and a few forks in the road where you potentially could have gone in a different route?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, so after my gap year, I didn't just straight away go into this. I went to Bath University. Okay. At Bath University, I was studying business administration there. And to be honest, at Bath, my dream was to work for Accenture as a consultant. So going down that traditional route, I suppose. I ended up actually getting a placement at Shell as a consultant there, kind of like, being an in-house consultant, like but then I ended up quitting that placement after 3 months to then spend the remainder of my initial placement period doing influencer.
Okay.
And safe to say that was probably quite a difficult conversation to try and quit a placement at Shell and actually potentially ruin my, Shell's relationship with Bath as well.
Yeah.
I just remember being in this.
Was that in your like sandwich year, like a sort of third? Is that how it works?
Yeah.
It's like in your third year. So you've got this placement at Shell and you've just gone, nah, not for me. I'm going to just spend the rest of the time working on my own business.
Honestly, I had someone quite senior at Shell pull me into this meeting room. And when I told them that I was quitting, and they were like, this is like the first time this has happened. Is everything okay? And I basically had just done my first round of investment through Crowdcube.
Okay.
Hence, we'd raised like 150 grand. And I was like, well, people have put this faith into me. I can't just carry on trying to do Shell, uni, and influencer at the same time. Never going to work. So I got put in this meeting room, and like someone that was quite senior, I think it was like the VP of Fuels and Innovation at Shell. And he was like, can you just walk me through what's happened? And I explained it to him. And then he literally said to me, he was like, well, you've got much bigger balls than I did at your age. So best of luck to you, mate. And then just shook my hand. It was like a 3-minute meeting. But really? I think he was really concerned I was leaving maybe because something internally, but there was nothing internally wrong. It was just, I wanted to pursue influencer and really take it to the next level.
Yeah, no, that's a really cool story. How did you find working in that environment? Like, do you feel like if you hadn't had influencer, it actually could have been quite suited, or do you just not feel like it was really for you?
I think, working in a big corporate isn't really me, unless the corporate operates like a startup, so to speak. So what I mean by that is, I think, an illustrious company like Shell, I think it's like the 6th largest company in the world.
Yeah,
There are
yeah,
so many, there are so many people there, and there's so much going on
yeah.
that in reality, it's kind of like, if I don't do my job, is it actually going to affect Shell? No, not, no.
Yeah,
To,
yeah,
to put it bluntly. Whereas for me, I like knowing that when I'm doing something, it has a direct impact on the result. So I think,
yeah,
moving on to potentially about what would happen after influence, I don't think I could go back to work in a big corporate. But I would certainly love to be involved within businesses where I'm making that direct impact, whether that be setting up another business because I just have a passion for entrepreneurship, or being part of a corporate but in the innovation department, so to
yeah,
speak. Something
yeah,
like that might be of interest, but
yeah.
still young, still completely dedicated to influencer. So that's a
Yeah,
long journey away.
that makes sense. So how did you actually go about the? So you kind of realized that there. So just going back to the Breeze situation, and you were using these micro influencers and kind of having some success with using them, I imagine. So did you then spot that there was this kind of lag behind, like there was this real opportunity? I guess, was that the early days of, what would it have been at the time, like Twitter and Facebook as the platforms that those guys were using?
Yeah, so Twitter was the main one. Facebook as well. Like Facebook, because the algorithms hadn't really changed at Facebook at the time, so you were able to like growth hack quite quickly on Facebook. I remember doing a competition to be like the face of Breeze on Facebook, and suddenly that grew our page overnight to like 20,000 likes, just because it was like one of those like and share
Okay.
competitions.
Oh,
Now
wow.
Facebook can stamp down on those.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the algorithm's not as favorable, but it was like quite easy to like grow pages, so to speak, back then.
Yeah.
And then on Twitter, it was all about just using these creators to really I guess build up that voice and build up that conversation on social media. And you tended to find that when you used quite a few at the same time, it was getting other people talking, because everyone was like, what's going on? What's
Yeah.
this brand everyone's talking about? So try to do as much of that as possible as
Yeah.
well.
And it's interesting because social media, because it was such a new thing at that time. Before that, I guess, because obviously, getting well-known people to endorse products is something that's been probably used throughout time as a marketing tactic. But I think what was the new trend was the, as you say, like micro influencers, that literally anyone could create a following around a passion, or like, a reserve Chelsea footballer who's not going to necessarily be shown on BBC or Sky Sports by those, like, allowed in through those gatekeepers, but they can just create their own profile. So that, I guess, was the new thing that was coming into the world. So,
Yeah, I
and
suppose
then,
just on
yeah,
just that point, Harry. I mean, it was, I suppose, essentially what influencer marketing is it's just word of mouth, but
yeah,
it's a new generation of word of mouth, because
yeah,
typically, as you said, people just listen to who these like trailblazers or the leaders within the industry or the influencers within the industry were,
yeah,
and they wanted to act on it. Now, because we don't just talk to each other in person, we also talk to each other through social. It's essentially just making use of that social audience that people have amassed, right?
yeah,
And going back to the power of the micro influencers, in essence, it's, well, the people follow micro influencers not because they know them by name. It tends to be because that they're interested in something that they're doing or something that they posting about, right?
yeah.
And what that tends to create is a stronger connection, because they're not like a celebrity, but
Mm-hmm.
there is something about them which they're maybe aspiring to be interested in, or aspiring to be like. So take the Chelsea reserve team players. It might have been that people who were really loyal Chelsea fans
Yeah.
wanted to follow these players, understand it. So if one of the these players spoke about something, then they're really going to interact with it, because there is that level of loyalty, so to speak.
Yeah, and the connection's almost deeper because they're not this huge celebrity that's not going to give them any time. There's almost that feeling that they actually will give them some time back, and you can actually forge a real connection there.
Exactly that. And I think that's what helps, because with a lot of these smaller creators as well, they often respond to comments, they often actually interact with their fans, because I suppose they're able to, because of the scale,
Yeah.
the engagement, so to speak.
When I actually think about some buying decisions that I've made, I've actually even sometimes it's been someone who's just shared something. They probably they might even have like 500 followers or 600 followers, but they've just shared something because they really liked this new like pair of trainers they got, and they just like put them on their story. And actually for me, that's probably the most like authentic bit of advertising that could have been done, because you're just like, there's no incentive other than they just really want to recommend the product. So I guess, yeah, that's what you're really tapping into, I guess.
Yeah, and I suppose it's quite interesting because where the authenticity has come is, it is obviously a big question within influencer marketing, because ultimately, these influencers are getting paid to talk about something, right? But as advertising regulations have come more into our industry, authenticity has had to build, because essentially now when a creator gets paid to do a post, they have to put #ad, or they have to use the paid partnerships tool.
Yeah.
Now, what this has actually meant is there's much more authenticity, because their followers now see that they're being paid for it. So they can't really lie about having this authentic relationship, or they can't try and disguise having this authentic relationship. So it's important that they only work with brands that they do have this relationship with. Otherwise, people just unfollow them and be like, I'm not listening to you anymore. You're a sellout, so to speak.
Yeah.
So it's so important that now the influencers have this, I guess, added weight where they are working with brands that they only truly believe in.
Yeah. Cool. And then, so you kind of started to formulate this business idea, I imagine. You said that was in your gap year before uni. So you kind of had the idea there, and were you kind of growing it on the side in year 1 and 2 at uni as a very small operation? And so talk to me about how you then used this crowdfunding platform to kind of kick it off, and also when did Caspar come into the pit, and how did that come about? I heard there was a meeting on Tinder or something, but yeah, talk to me about how that kind of it went to the next level.
Yeah, I'll explain that Tinder one a little bit further. That's what our marketing team love to talk about. But first things first, no. I mean, we all know what first year of uni is like, right? Let's be honest, like you're not exactly having to dedicate a full amount of time to it. I think it's often let's just make sure I get 40% so that I can get into year 2, because it doesn't count your degree.
Yeah.
And I certainly was no stranger to doing that exact type of first year approach, because I spent a lot of my time building on influencer and obviously having fun with my mates and freshers. My course was actually it was a different type of sandwich course, where you do 6 months in second year and 6 months in third year. So my shell placement was the first 6 months supposedly second year, but it was actually 3 months of second year, and then the next 3 months I did influencer, and then I dropped out. Suspended my studies. They gave me a very generous 7-year suspended studies if I wanted to go back, which I won't be going back, but I mean, it's nice to see that
still on the table.
Actually, still on the table. Actually, quite a funny story. There's an entrepreneur who I really look up to called Ahmed, who's the founder of AKQA, which is a creative agency that got bought by WPP for 300 million. Now, Ajaz actually set up AKQA while he was at Bath Uni doing my course. So some nice tie-ins there.
Some good alumni.
Exactly, very good alumni. So I dropped him a message just before I was going to drop out, while I'd already dropped off my shell placement and committed to influencer. And I basically said to him, look, I've raised some money. I want to focus on the influencer space. I really want to grow influencer. Do you think I should drop out? And he basically just sent me a message, and I was expecting him to be like, yeah, of course, mate. That's what all the best entrepreneurs do. And he basically just said no. He was like, no, I don't think you should. I think you should focus on your education and then go back to the influence world afterwards. Anyway, didn't take his advice, dropped out. Then I sent him an email saying, just to let you know, I haven't actually taken your advice. I did drop out. And then he goes, great, I actually wanted you to. I didn't want the uni or your mum emailing me saying, why have you told this person to drop out? So
that's brilliant. So he was almost using it as he was testing how much you wanted it as well, I guess.
Exactly.
It's important to have
completely.
those. I think it's important to have those role models that you just randomly seek out when you're making a decision like that, because if you, like, obviously 90% of the people that you'd spent time with probably at that time would have said that you were crazy to drop out. So just having someone that you really trust and look up to is important, right?
Oh, completely. I mean, most of all, initially my parents, when I told them that I was going to drop out, they're like, we put you through all this education, you got into Bath, you got this placement at Shell, what on earth are you doing?
Yeah.
But then, I suppose when they saw the passion and the dedication that I was willing to commit to influencer, I suppose, I'm fortunate enough that they then, I guess, changed their mind and were happy for me to, to make that leap of faith, so to speak. So the actual raise on CrowdCube was quite interesting because there was basically two people in the year above me at Bath, and both of these two people in the year above me had raised money. So there was one person who launched a business called Pan and Ice, which is basically the rolled up ice cream. I'm not sure if you've seen it actually. Like, they've got a couple of sites like Westfield and so forth. And then there was another business called Lux Rewards, which was like discount cards and reward cards. Anyway, they both raised like around 100 grand, and I was like, wow, this is insane. Entrepreneur society. So you heard about all of these entrepreneurs at Bath raising money and doing cool things, and I went to speak to them. It was like that they joined this accelerator program called Ideas Square that was based out of Bristol, and I basically spoke to this accelerator program, and they basically help you get a business from like a bedroom business, so to speak, to a boardroom business. Although I'm in a bedroom right now, but it is
still there.
Still there. But they basically put you through like a 6-week crash course of just getting things up to date, of like pitch deck, financial projections, like cleaning, like, accounting and legal stuff up, to make sure you're in the best possible position to actually take on investment. So did that, then managed to raise £150,000, which was awesome, from 139 investors at the time, which was actually initially what we call now like our pre-seed, our pre-seed raise, because that helped start building the initial pieces of our technology and to bring on the first few staff or first few team members to really help grow the company, so to speak. Anyway, it was then after we'd done that raise that I met Caspar. So our marketing team like to call it a Tinder success story, but I'll elaborate on this one.
So, please do.
One of my, at the time, actually matched with Caspar on Tinder, and I basically said to her at the time, they ended up actually going out, so it was a little bit further. It wasn't just a random match, and then this was the first question she went into. They ended up going out for about 6 months, and while they were going out, I was like, look, you've got to introduce me to Caspar. Like, Caspar's leading the way on the creator front. I'm really trying to grow, influencer from an advertiser front. This merge, which all this merged personalities will be this perfect machine or engine driving the industry forward. And she was like, look, I can set you up with a half an hour coffee, no guarantees you'll be of interest, but just see how it goes. We ended up literally having like a strategy session for like 2.5 hours where we were literally just vibing off each other. It was awesome. And Caspar came on board, and ever since, we've just grown the company together, which has been, awesome, because we certainly wouldn't have had the success that we've had today without understanding both the advertiser and the creative side to the business.
For sure. So did you feel that was like kind of a missing piece of the puzzle? Like what did Caspar bring that was it just pure like connections with all the influencer world? Like he could just get you on board with them?
Yeah, so it was connections with the influencer world, but also it just added that layer of like authenticity to us as a business.
Yep. Yep.
So one of the key things was that I suppose, that time was maybe 21. And I was trying to, create this marketing company, which was obviously very difficult when I hadn't necessarily brought on board much senior experience within the business. And, I'm trying to go in to win these big pictures or pitches, sorry. So I was basically like, how can I add that level of authenticity where people will take us as a business seriously and want to get us involved?
Yeah.
And that's what Caspar added. Caspar
Mm-hmm.
had a phenomenal reputation as one of like, I guess, the OG YouTubers, so to speak.
Yeah.
So I think at the time as well, there was a YouTube campaign, like ad campaign running, where Caspar's face was basically like on all of the tube posters and out of home advertising. It was like, the perfect timing to get him on board. And yeah, it just really helped grow the business, so to speak.
Yeah, for sure. And if you don't mind me asking, like, so how does it work with him now? Like, what's his role within the business? Is it more like a sort of non-exec role where he like helps with your marketing and reaching out to clients, or is he quite involved in the day-to-day as well?
Yeah, and Caspar's really involved in the day-to-day. Obviously, he's still got his own YouTube commitment, and he's also invests in quite a lot of startups as well. So he was time taken away for there. But Caspar's still, I'd say, around 3 days a week working on influencer, and that will be having sessions with various senior management. Maybe he'll be having sessions with the commercial team and the marketing team to better understand things, and offer his advice. Or also Caspar joining like pitches to clients, or helping do like company-wide presentations and so forth. But no, I think it's awesome to have that that presence within the business. It just shows that we know the influencer marketing space.
100%. No, it's really cool to hear the story there. I feel we've got a pretty good insight to how it all started up. But yeah, I wanted to transition onto just social media in general. And I know we had a kind of interesting chat off air about just the social media space. And I think, as I mentioned at the very start, there's been a lot coming into our awareness. Like we've sort of, social media is just, obviously taken off and people use it, but it's only in the last couple of years we've actually started to question, like, is it good for us as a society? And like, I'm just, being someone that works, at the forefront of using these platforms to market things. I guess I want, if I start off by just, I'm interested to hear like, what's your take on, and I think Instagram's probably a good one to focus on because Instagram and Facebook are probably under the most pressure in terms of, from a mental health perspective. I think there's been a lot said about the business models and how it's all about trying to grab as much attention as possible, even of quite young people of younger ages, when they have no like conceptual awareness of what these platforms are actually doing. And then it's their attention that these companies are selling to advertisers. So if you can, like, just would you like be able to summarize sort of your thoughts around this kind of whole topic of the social dilemma and what these platforms are doing?
Yeah, I think I'm glad that you touched on the social dilemma because as a documentary, it highlighted some really key issues with social media. It was actually quite interesting. Yesterday, it got announced that like TikTok had actually overtaken Instagram in terms of the average dwell time of a user on the platform. And they were like, massively celebrating this as we finally got people spending more time on TikTok than we've got on Instagram. And it was really interesting because, I suppose these apps want to captivate your attention. They want you to be staying within the actual platform itself. Obviously, in turn, the reasons behind that is so that they can deliver more ads to you so that they can then in turn make more business. But what the social dilemma highlighted was that I suppose there was a lot of negative effects of certain features that they'd implemented, which they hadn't expected to become negative effects. So the obvious one is the like button, right? Because what it started becoming was, people became obsessed with who could get the most likes. And, you've got to admit it, there was that feeling that when you would get a like on your Instagram, it'd be like that dopamine hit where you'd be like, great, I've got that validation, awesome. And it was becoming unhealthy because of the obsession over it. And that's why Instagram did the move that they did, where they've hidden now the numbers of likes, because they've tried to make you not necessarily compare yourselves to other people based on that. Even though that you can see your own numbers, you can't see other people's numbers. So that was a really big and important step, which I think they've done. They're actually looking at, and they are trialing at the moment in New Zealand, hiding follower numbers. Now that's an even bigger step. But again, it's important to see, will this have improvements and so forth? Because if there are ways which we can, I guess, stop becoming obsessed with the less important things on social media, such as the likes and the follower numbers, whereas what it initially was brought to make, which was to share photos and share videos and share those moments with friends, families, and other people. It's less about, I guess, what other people necessarily think of it. It's more that you want to, share these moments so that other people can enjoy them and not necessarily have to give their opinion or whether they like them or not. Yeah. So I think, that's where the social dilemma really helped to speak more freely on that. And it actually led to us launching a report called Unsocial Media. So what we've basically talked about in this report is essentially the companies that focus less on the social metrics are the companies that will win. And what we mean by that is stop necessarily focusing a campaign on how many people saw it or how many likes it got or how many comments it got, but actually dig deeper into the data and unravel what it actually means. So, things like, what did the comments actually say? Did they show purchase intent? How many clicks did it actually have, and how many sales did it actually drive? Because it's so important to understand what the data means rather than just seeing it as a number on a paper, just because you have to hit certain engagement targets or audience targets. So we basically released this report. We got about 30 people from the industry, from people from social networks to advertisers to creators, all giving their opinions. And it was just amazing to see so many people aligned with basically that viewpoint, that they believe that social media is almost becoming unsocial and that advertisers need to be moving in that direction.
Yeah, there's a couple of really interesting points there. Like, just firstly on that one that you just mentioned, I think less focus on the metrics, more focus on like the deeper purpose of what you're trying to share. Because I think I've even got caught up in this one myself, is that, like, as you say, like, you post something and it gets the likes and it feels good, and then there's a temptation to just go in that direction, like whatever's going to get the most likes, and just sort of to try and win this game, the better. But it can kind of take you away from what you really want to do and who you really are. It like becomes quite shallow. Whereas actually the stuff that you really want to post and share isn't going to get that many likes, and people might not be that interested in it. And you sort of shy away from that because it's just not going to get the validation. So I think that's been a bit of a battle for me, like just using a platform like Instagram. But yeah, I think that's a really good like way of looking at it, to try and ignore as much as you can those like shallow metrics and think about the level of it.
Well, I think what's quite interesting is you've seen this probably rise over the last year or so of finsters, which is basically what people are calling like their fake instas or their second instas.
Okay, yeah.
Like these like secondary accounts, which is basically them just posting what they want to post.
Yeah.
But they've only got maybe like their close friends on it. I think that's why Instagram in reality actually brought out their close friends feature. It's just because people wanted to share stuff to, like, a smaller community, but they didn't necessarily want people to know about it, but and actually have to interact with it, so to speak.
That's really interesting. Like, yeah, because you feel like on your serious profile, like you have to be really careful about what brand you're putting out there, and like, But whereas, yeah, in these kind of close friends or more private ones, you can just be your actual self. But I've heard this is more of a thing with the younger generation, and my old generation are slightly.
I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, I've got on my Instagram, I've got investors, I've got
Yeah.
clients. I
Yeah.
can't exactly be posting photos of a night out on an Instagram story. Let's be realistic. They'd be like, I think that's a bit too far then. So I think everyone's got to be a little bit, careful sometimes when they're posting online. But, no, it is interesting. I think the point I wanted to go back to, which you did mention, unless you want to go back to a later stage, was just around mental health.
Yeah.
That now, or if you want to touch on it.
Yeah. Let's go there. Yeah, I was just gonna crack into it. I'm sure there's a few different things that I want to bring up as well, so I'm sure they'll relate.
Yeah, so I think one thing we've particularly noticed about, and we see it with creators, so to speak, is because of this added weight of when they start building up these audiences, there becomes this like added level of pressure, so to speak, over who they are online. And what you tend to find with a lot of creators, they actually do suffer from really bad mental health issues, because they've built themselves up so much online that they're almost worried about when people see them in person or meet them in person, that there's someone completely different.
Yeah.
And they often, when you meet creators, they're like, oh, did you think that I was the same as I was online and all the rest of it? And you're like, yeah, like, of course, and all the rest of it. And it's a problem which is, not just amongst, creators and influencers, but just amongst, the whole generation, really, where people sometimes trying to create a persona on social media that perhaps they're very different to that persona in real life. But no, we've partnered up with a charity called Young Minds, which helps support people with mental health problems, or not problems, but mental health issues. And I think it's so important to be able to give people, that support and that advice, that they know that there are people that they can talk to, and that they know that, it's just important to, not necessarily get so focused and facts around who this image is that you're trying to create online. And I see quite a lot of my friends actually doing a very, very simple technique which massively improves their mental health, which is either they turn off their actual Instagram notifications on their phone, and then that helps remove the concern over having to quickly let their phone and see, just there on the notifications. That massively things. And sometimes my friends do like social media detoxes, where they'll actually delete the app from their phone for like a week every month, just so that they're not focusing their attention on it. But I think those sort of things are some quite useful.
Definitely. And I think the more awareness that comes to the fore about these topics, like, people will take a little detox and just rewire their brain a bit and just focus on the reality, and that these platforms are just a tool to share things. They're not reality. But yeah, I can definitely understand that pressure from creators, and also just, essentially it just kind of puts a magnifying glass on any kind of social insecurities that you already have, because everyone cares a little bit about how they're being perceived and how you're going to look in front of friends. And Instagram is literally there for everyone to see at all times. So it's tough. It is tough. But it will be interesting to see where that goes. I mean, the last thing I was going to say that I just wanted to bring up on that point was the follower numbers. And I think that is a massive one, because like I actually was listening to an interview with the guy who made the Social Dilemma documentary, and he was saying how Twitter added the follower numbers, and that was a massive moment in the context of social media, because it then became this kind of fame lottery that you could potentially one day be famous and be rich and all these things. And I think, and like the retweet button, and you could go back on, you see your followers have increased, and that is really addictive, like that, the fame lottery basically. And I think that built in with these reality TV shows, where you can potentially just kind of jump on a reality show and then suddenly your follower number rockets up, and then you can make a career out of it for the rest of your life. Like, I think no wonder there's people that are aspiring to do that, because it looks quite fun and it looks quite easy. But yeah, it definitely for 98% of the population, that causes like a strange dynamic, I think.
Yeah, I think there's two things in that. I guess the first, going on the whole element of social currency, there's obviously that mirror episode where
Yeah, really good.
Easy to think that if you've got like a higher rating, you can have stuff like cheaper for you. But then that's kind of how it works a lot within the influencer space as well. Because influencers
definitely
get gifted with things.
Yeah,
People get, help to have them as like ambassadors. So, it is crazy, I guess, how much value is associated to it. But the reason there's so much value associated to it is just because of the return advertisers do get. So it's not it's not an unquantifiable value, because the advertisers do get their return, and that's why there is so much money being put into it. It's the same when people are wondering about, like footballers, for example, about the amount that they get paid. But it's the simple factor is that because there's so much media spend into it, because it's the return that they're getting. So it is quantifiable, so to speak.
Which worries me slightly, because, from it applies to everyone, but I'm just going to use the example of like an 18-year-old girl. This is more like exacerbated for, is they see this going on, and they see that, for them to maybe show a bit more skin creates more likes, more engagement, and therefore more social currency that then literally potentially leads to a better career. Like, you almost can't blame them for wanting to post things that actually ethically aren't really very like, and I think that's the issue that these platforms are trying to get at. And I think I would take my hat off to Instagram if they did decide to, do away with the number of followers, but it would be a big risk for them, surely.
Yeah, I guess stemming on that first point you mentioned, it's obviously, I guess, crazy just to see, the growth in things like even like OnlyFans, how much that's like, right? It's like $1 billion company now, which is crazy, right? I think that industry will always be necessarily huge, so to speak. But I think it's necessarily, I guess, focusing on, if people want to have this social currency, it's why they want to have the social currency. Is it for social gratification? Is it because they're actually trying to build something which they want to just share, perhaps a passion? So it might be that they're a food and drink creator, a fitness creator, and they want to share a passion. They want to bring people along the journey to understand how they got to that sort of, to that sort of place. And I think it is interesting when you speak to a lot of reality TV stars and ask them why they went on, I don't know, a Made in Chelsea, why they went on Geordie Shore or whatever. And the most common reason, or, a Love Island, is because I wanted to become an influencer afterwards. And you're like, that's mad. You do that to get, I guess, take that shortcut to becoming it. And, when I was younger, like going back to being like, I remember like 8, 9 years old, the main job that everyone wanted, or even when I was 16, the main job that everyone wanted was to become a professional sportsman. Like that was like the dream. It was like, if I could be a footballer, if I could be a professional player, that would be the goal. Now it's to become a YouTuber, which is, it's crazy, but it just shows, I guess, where the path people are going down and the path. But I think the most important thing from all of this, I guess, just to go full 360 on it, is that it's therefore so important that those who have amassed these large followings to really be those role models and realize that when they are talking about things online and when they are sharing things with their followers, that, a lot of younger people do look up to them and they will take advice and they will, I guess, act in a similar way to them. So it's so important for them to, just understand that as role models. So, it's great to see that there are a number of creators who do take that responsibility. And, I think one creator who's been shouting about quite a lot recently is from actually Love Island, is Dr. Alex. He's been sharing, his scenes from behind the COVID ward, so to speak, where he's been working. He's been using his influence for real good to basically just help amplify the messages of the NHS. And I think that's fantastic to see, because that's, I suppose, a true role model in essence.
Really good way to round it up, I think. And at the end of the day, it is, it's down to the user's responsibility for how they use the platform and what they share. But I know you are fairly strapped for time, so I wanted to jump into the final round, because I've got a few questions for you that I just want to throw at you and see how you react to the jabs. So my first question is a bit of a curveball, but it's what's something that you believe that most people don't?
So there's always the biggest phrase, and I actually don't like the phrase, but I believe in the principles of it, which is don't work harder, work smarter. So I don't like how the phrase is positioned, but
Yeah.
there's this common perception that you have to work till like 1 a.m. or like 2 a.m. Every evening to be able to get the results that you're actually trying to drive. That's just simply not the case. And it really frustrates me that there are people online who are basically talking about this consistent hustle you have to do, that you can't have a social life and that you can't have like a personal life and you must just work, work, work. And it's not about that. It's just about, using your time most efficiently.
Yeah.
And it's important to have those other things in life to help ensure that you've got that balance, so to speak, across everything.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's a good one. I think some of the time there's working those ridiculous hours till 1 a.m. It's like, what are you trying to prove something to yourself? I know that in certain companies that's a culture, but even entrepreneurs starting out like working till 3 a.m. It's like it's like almost to make up for something. Like, even though it's way better to have 9 hours in the day that are really quality and you've doing the right thing than like 15 hours where you're just tired, like slumped to the desk and not really putting out good quality. Yeah. So I think that's a really good one. The second question I had was, I try and ask this to pretty much everyone who comes on now, and it's normally in relation to the chat we've had, but how would you like the world to have changed in 5 years' time?
I think I've been immensely proud of how the world's changed in the last 6 months, in essence of how people have focused on less on like less materialistic things, but more on what's important. And there was a phrase which is 2021's like the year of almost like gratitude, so to speak, and being thankful, or even 2020 was of things right now. And I think I want to make sure that, I'd love for the world to make sure that over the next 5 years that doesn't go away, and that as things start to become open again and as the world starts to go back to a little bit more normality, we're still thankful for what we have. And that means realizing that sometimes spending time with people or something is much more important necessarily than gifting something to someone or so forth. So I think that's just a really key message where I'd like to see the world continuing to be like, because I think that they have done a very good job over the last 6 months of really doing so.
Yeah. And do you think that's because just this situation has slowed the pace down a little bit? That's just given people more time to reflect? And that's like, what do you think the reason is why they've had this more sense of gratitude?
Yeah, I think the world has almost, I mean, it got put in April and May quite quickly as just like a pause button.
Yeah.
And it just allowed everyone to slow down and actually kind of do a lot of things which they didn't necessarily feel like they had the time to do, and then just start to almost not necessarily recreate themselves, but like reprioritize certain things. I think that's just been tremendously helpful for a lot of people.
For sure.
But yeah, no, I think you'd say so.
Yeah, no, it's a good reset moment, like what this whole time has been. And I think people are getting used to the new way of living. Awesome. Well, the last question I ask is anyone who comes in the ring, they have, rather than a track to play them into the ring and hype them up in boxing, in unboxing, you get a track to play you out. So what would yours be and why?
So my track would be Waves by Robin Scholes. And the reason why it'd be Waves is basically we have this ethos at Influencer, which is where we talk about how our creators and our clients make waves. And it's basically this idea seen to the fact that when our creators tell stories, it builds these human connections, which sets off waves of influence. We basically say these waves of influence become our data layers, and we like to measure all of them. So our clients and our creators measure or make waves, and we measure the impact of them.
Love it. Works really well. I look forward to getting that and playing it out at the end of the podcast. But Ben, thanks very much for giving me a time. It's been really interesting to chat about all things social media and your story. Hope you've enjoyed it too. And hopefully chat to you soon.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Harry, for having me on. Really enjoyed it as well. And look forward to catching up in actual real life when we're allowed, so to speak.
Exactly. There's so many people that I've met and actually had relationships now with just through purely Zoom. So when I actually come to meeting them, it'll be good fun.
Definitely.
All right. Cheers, Ben. Have a good rest of the day.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Harry.